All right, it's 1 o'clock here in Boston and time to get started with the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A. I'm Dave McCormick here from Alpha Software. Pleased to be joined by Dion McCormick. Today we are going to be going over, actually I forget what we're going over, but I'm sure Dion will explain it at the beginning. The important thing is whatever we go over, we will be answering your questions. So I would please encourage you to type them in now into the questions box of the GoToWebinar interface. The two things you should know, besides the fact that you should get type your questions in that box, the other thing is that you can find copies of the recordings at videos.alphasoftware.com, and today's session will also be recorded and can also be found there. So let's get started. Hello, Dion. Are you there?
Very much so.
Excellent. Let me go ahead and make you the presenter, and you should see a dialog box on your screen.
You have to learn to trust, Dave. We have you taken care of. It's all been planned out. Just sit back, relax, and we'll take care of everything.
Oh, you sound like hell.
Exactly.
Great. Well, I'm seeing your screen, so it looks like everything's working.
Great. I'm not going to do that, Dave. Well, thank you, everybody. We really, really are excited to have you with us, and we appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us. As always, this is about you. This is making sure that we can deliver information that you find valuable, that will help you learn Alpha faster, use Alpha more effectively, and deploy amazing solutions. What we're going to do today, excuse me, is I'm going to finish up my roadmap discussion. We covered what's coming up in the next release, which is kind of targeted towards the first quarter of 2016. But part of it too, and this was all presented at the Alpha Development Conference, we want to show you also what's planned for the rest of next year, because there's a lot of very exciting things there and a lot of things that are going to really improve the platform and make you or allow you to do amazing things. So with that, first, in your GoToWebinar meeting control panel, there is a questions area. Please put in some questions. Actually, we got a couple great questions this week, and I'm going to cover one of them, and we're scheduling up a full session on another one, so we appreciate anybody who's sending in those questions. We really want to see those. But for now, again, after the roadmap, I'm going to go over that one question, and then obviously take any from our meeting today. So take the time, go into the questions area, get them in there while I'm talking. Dave will be reviewing them and getting them queued up so we can try and answer those for you. So first, just process check, screen coming through okay, Dave, sound, etc.
Everything is coming through.
Cool, cool, excellent. So as we talked about before, at the Alpha DevCon 2015, fantastic event, Selwyn Ravens gave us a great roadmap, and basically I'm taking that information and providing that to you today. The previous two we covered what was on tap for Q1, but now I'd like to jump down and talk to you about what's in the hopper for the balance of next year, really after that point. And what we call is kind of post V4. The V4 release is scheduled for the first quarter, and we'll be keeping you posted on that. Bits and parts are available in the pre-release, so if you have an alpha and a pre-release, we always say make sure to not use that on production systems, but a lot of the capabilities are in there for you to start getting your hands around and start training yourself and getting used to what the new technologies are. But as we go forward, more and more official releases will come out next quarter, and we'll be rocking and rolling. So here's what's going to be kind of happening past or post Q1, and this kind of gives you hopefully a good feel for where the company is going. So number one is a graphical form builder. Is right now when you're building mobile optimized forms, right now it's kind of it uses our current technology, current techniques, but what we're going to be working on is improving the ability for you to design mobile optimized forms. And if you watch our pre-roadmap videos from the last couple of weeks, one of the key features of the V3 release in Q1 is the Alpha tablet optimized form technology, which brings dramatic improvements in terms of how you're going to be able to develop, maintain, and build. And there's so many cool things in there. We're going to be spending basically all next year unwrapping all the things you can do. But one of the key things that Alpha always wants to focus on is how to improve the speed at which you can develop, deploy items, and one of the areas is using graphical form builders. So part of that is they'll be revving that and improving that in the next, in the post, so Q2 is really when they're targeted, and that's all going to be built off that great infrastructure in terms of tablet optimized mobile optimized forms. So that's a real exciting part there. The other really cool thing, and this is really, I think, has the ability to be just kind of the knock it out of the park capability for next year, is that it's called the Alpha Cloud. You may have heard about this before, but and it's really coming together very nicely. But the idea is Alpha is building a hosting solution that's built on AWS. It's called the Alpha Cloud. And the benefits of this are going to be enormous. First is, let's say you have a client and you want to spin up, you've developed a solution, you want to spin up a Alpha hosting environment. You can really go on with a few clicks, a few, fill out a form, boom, you could have a fully set up, ready to go Alpha Cloud installation, ready to go for your application. You publish your items to it and you're in business. And so it will be very fast and easy for you to spin up and create these, taking away a lot of the friction for doing that. And it has a lot of unique opportunities too, which I'll mention in a moment. But the second area, which is very, very powerful, is that the Alpha Cloud is going to be elastic in nature, which means that you can start with a little small instance of Alpha. Let's say you're in the development phase. And then you start moving into the validation phase where you're bringing a number of more users on it. Then you can actually, basically, you can either tell it or the system will automatically scale up your hosting environment to support the demands that are placed on that. And then let's say you go into full production, you need more bandwidth, boom, the system will continue to scale up. And you can control this process. It's very exciting. So the idea is you can have basically an instance that can scale up to handle more and more of your requirements of your demand on your system over time, and get rid of all the how to set up redirecting and all these other things, etc. Plus, since it's built on the AWS cloud, which is very, very powerful, and that's the Amazon Web Services, you have a high level of reliability and availability. I mean, you look at places like Netflix and other very large installations are being hosted on that environment. So the Alpha Cloud has some really great abilities for you to quickly spin things up. Also, you'll be able to then have it elastically increase in capacity as you require. So therefore, you don't have to build out this huge infrastructure for your future. You basically start, and then the system will scale as you need to scale. Very, very cool there. And I think it will also open up some very interesting business opportunities for people. One of the key things I've noticed, and I'm seeing it as a trend, is the fact that more and more companies are obviously going away from self-hosting or self-environments onto hosting out with external people. For instance, I just saw a story where GE has 34 different data centers. Within the next year or two, they will be shutting down 32 of those data centers and moving them over onto Amazon. And this is similar with what's going on with Azure, with Azure, which is Microsoft. Also, Oracle is going to have their implementation. So the cost benefits of having this in place are enormous. So where's the business opportunity for you? I think one of the things you need to be thinking about is that when you go out and are working with clients to develop solutions with them, now you can package up and say, hey, guess what? I can provide you the solution, the technology, but I can also provide you the hosting, and then you can basically have the Alpha Cloud take care of all the heavy lifting, and you can basically buy and resell Alpha Cloud. It's really some very cool opportunities there to create recurring revenue streams. So that's scheduled up. That's really beta testing is starting in second quarter. We're really spending a lot of engineering time on this to make sure that it is just going to be rock solid, easy to use, very simple to set up and maintain, and also for you to leverage. So very excited about that. Now, another key area that we're working on is in offline. Obviously, we are way ahead of the curve in terms of offline capabilities. With our ability to have disconnected lists and the ability for the disconnected list to manage offline data, we're really heads and tails above everybody else. There's so much that does to make life easier for the developer. But we're not stopping there. There's a lot of enhancements and improvements we can do to the offline area. And so we're really focusing on that. One is that right now the list control kind of traps everything and manages as JSON, but we'll also be able to support a SQLite database on the mobile device, which we've had a lot of requests for, that is a well-standardized utilization of that technology and adds a lot of really cool features to it. But the idea is we want to make it as simple as it is now in terms of check a box and you're done, not having to do a whole bunch of configuration in other people. And remember, that does require PhoneGap. The other is to extend the client-side data model. Basically, there's a great video out there, and I'm not sure if I talked about it, but you have the ability to cache data on the mobile device. So what you can do is, let's say you had a list of states. You could actually have on the mobile device, you can cache that data there so that all your forms or your web browsers use local data so things happen really fast. Well, we're going to extend that and kind of disconnect from the list control the idea of a local data model. And that's going to open up a lot of really powerful ways that you can use the technology. But again, when this happens, it's going to be point click, select a few checkboxes, and the system will manage it for you. And then we'll have real-time two-way sync of data and also enhancements to the overall UX component to allow what are called single-page applications. Thus, you can have a very robust and functional single-page application, which the challenge with that is it's nice because everything's on a single page, so it's very dynamic, interactive. The downside is that that page gets very large, so it can place a lot of demands. Well, one of the cool things that Alpha is doing is that they're taking and changing how those pages are managed by Alpha, so therefore it's only showing the parts that are relevant at one time, thus keeping the sort of footprint low for the mobile device and increasing speed, performance, and overall reliability. So a lot of really cool things that this is, again, post Q1 that are going to be working on that are really going to enhance your ability to create these mobile disconnected applications and do really fun and exciting things with them. Now, another area we're really going to be focusing on, and this is in one of our general trends, is in the expansion of our ability to use third-party capabilities. And one of those key ones is called Node.js. So right now we do have Node.js integration where basically you can, in XBasic, call out to Node.js libraries that are running on the server. And for people who are not familiar with Node.js, what that is that server-side JavaScript. And we actually include the Google V8 engine that runs that. And the really neat thing about Node.js, which is super powerful, is that almost all major solutions support, they have Node.js libraries you can download to make it easy to integrate with them. So for instance, Dropbox, DocuSign, a lot of these other services, Box.net, you can download these Node.js libraries. They already encapsulate all the capabilities, so it's very easy for you to integrate it. In fact, I had a project recently where we literally within a day was able to do a full integration with the third-party signature capture or signature management system, kind of e-signature, all within a day because the benefit was we could use the Node.js libraries tied into Alpha. So that is there and available now. I want to make sure people are, if you want to start experimenting it, that's in the solution. There's a couple hoops you got to kind of jump through. So one of the key things we're going to be doing next year is what's called tightening that integration. So what we're going to allow you to do is much easier called Node.js from XBasic, so it's really easy to do that. You can do it now, it's fairly easy, but you have to do a couple steps. It'll become even easier. But also, which is very exciting, is that you're going to be able to actually call Node.js directly from your mobile applications and from your applications and bypass XBasic, which is kind of neat from a performance and a simplicity standpoint. You kind of get rid of one other layer that's within there. And again, this is kind of for more of the sophisticated folks out there, but as you start integrating with more and more third-party products, you're going to see this as a key requirement. The other part that's really exciting about this is that XBasic is a great language. It's amazingly powerful. If you've used it, you used it really well. You're in good shape. But it's kind of sort of target. It's an alpha product, and there's not a lot of. If you go on to third-party, freelancer sites, you don't see a lot of people who have XBasic experience, even though they can pick it up usually very quickly. But in the case of Node.js, there's a ton of Node.js experts out there. So if you need support, it's going to be very easy for you to leverage third-party people to help you do that. So very, very cool stuff from there. PhoneGap, one of the other really cool things that is slated for development next year is called the PhoneGap Shell application. Basically, right now, you can create you create a solution, wrap it in PhoneGap, it goes out. Very easy, very straightforward, works great. But what we found is that people want to actually have already kind of a shell application with a lot of native capabilities already built in that they can leverage in a much easier way. So what Alpha is going to be working on is, and we're in engineering right now, is how to create a shell app so it's going to be even faster and easier for you to create PhoneGap sort of dedicated applications for these platforms and simplify your life a lot, which is really, really powerful. We'll go into that. When it gets closer, we'll go through each of these and give you a little bit more detail. IAS, we're going to be continuing to tighten the integration. It is in production now. We're having clients use it and seeing really great results in terms of better performance, better manageability, and just in general, they really enjoy using that technology. But what we're going to do is tighten the integration even more with IAS, with the IDE, and also, which is really cool, is right now Alpha is really the web server for the Alpha applications. We're going to do something very, very neat, which is that we're going to actually use IAS as the potential default web server for Alpha applications. And again, we'll give you a demonstration of that down the road, but it really allows us to leverage that very extensive, powerful IAS. Basically, think of it as a web server engine with our technology, so you're going to get faster page responses, faster page delivery, faster overall operation, and much more reliability and improvability and a lot of other neat features. So that we're going to be spending a lot of engineering time next year improving that and going on there. Another one which is very, very popular and we've gotten a lot of requests for is Git integration. And let me explain a little bit about the background on that. First is that Alpha, to a large degree, was really built from the ground up to be a single developer tool. It kind of is just historically how it goes. But what we've seen over the last year or 2 years, that more and more we have team development efforts going on, specifically where you have a team of 4 or 5 programmers that are using Alpha to generate an end solution for a client. So therefore they need to coordinate, they need version control, etc. And you can do that right now. In fact, I use Git on a number of my projects where I use that for file management of it. But it's kind of a loosely coupled setup, meaning that I've set it up, it works, but it really kind of is layered on top of Alpha instead of integrated into Alpha. So what Alpha is going to be doing, because it's such a popular requirement and is so powerful, even for a single developer, man, Git's amazing because you can sit there and be archiving stuff and be able to roll back and do a lot of really fancy, neat things. For even an individual developer. But really, if you're in a team development environment, you need this version control capability. So we're going to be tightly integrating Git into the Alpha IDE, meaning you'll be able to literally have a menu item that says, check into Git, check out, and it takes care of everything. You don't have to use a secondary tool, which is how we do now. So this will improve the support for, multiple developer teams. And as Alpha continues to gain in popularity, especially in the enterprise space, people more and more are requiring larger solutions, and you just can't do that with a single coder. You need multiple people that are involved in it. And when you start looking at the overall environment, you also need to be able to support the ability to handle, say, QA people. So they can pull from this Git repository to do testing on releases and stuff. So very, very important from there. And the other thing, and this is very kind of interesting, is that right now the Alpha, and this is kind of more of a geeky techie thing, but Alpha, when you develop like a UX controller or a grid, it's actually saved as what's called a component file, an A5W CMP component file, which is a binary file. But what's going to happen next year, which is very interesting, is that what's going to be saved at is, instead of an A5W CMP file, a binary file, it's actually going to be rendered and saved as a JSON file. So the definition of that component will be a JSON file. And this is really cool for one particular reason, is that version control systems are really like to use, say, for instance, sort of text-oriented files. And just because a lot of the coding languages have like text files. When you write a Java program, it's a set of text files, whereas we there. So you have a lot of neat features to be able to say, I want to compare 2 files together, and since they're text, the system can do that for you. Since we're binary files, you really can't compare 2 binary files. You can say, well, this one's bigger than this one. You really can't tell from a lower level what's the difference between them. So this is going to open up a lot of ability for you to basically compare components and see what's difference between the two and do integration of elements and stuff. It really opens up a lot of neat. And again, this is kind of detailed, geeky stuff, but as you develop bigger and larger systems, you're going to require these kind of capabilities there. Okay, so that's Git integration. And then the last but not least is that we're looking at a SaaS business model for cloud-based development and hosting, meaning you actually can use the cloud to do some of the development of your applications. And this is very early, so there's not much data on this, but as we get more definition, we'll come back and do some more little presentations and review that with you. So as you can see, the developers are very busy individuals. Not only do we have key releases in January, but beyond, Q1, but beyond Q1, we have the graphical form builder, the Alpha Cloud, the offline capability. We're looking at also, oops, sorry about that, everybody. We also have Node.js integration, PhoneGap IIS, Git integration, and a whole transformation around the SaaS business model. So a lot of great stuff coming. Stuff you're going to immediately be able to use in Q1, things you can play with right now with the pre-release versions, but also right behind that we have a lot of incredible capabilities. And as I mentioned last time and the time before, which is very important for everybody, is that we are seeing the team continually focusing on performance and stability of the platform. In fact, I just saw that this week they did a new release of it's a pre-release right now, but it will be in the standard code stream, where they actually literally took certain callbacks between the mobile device and the server and increased the speed by 70%. Just by tuning up and improving things along those lines. So that is an ongoing continued effort by Alpha to make sure that when you develop and deploy applications, you get the highest speed, highest reliability, and you can gain all that benefit as the team continues to improve it while they're adding all these new functions and features and improvements to the system as they go along. So that's a quick roadmap of the post V4 development. And again, V4 is slated for Q1. They're working very feverishly on tying up all the loose ends, making sure it's tested, stable, and ready to go. But in the meantime, the research and work is being done on these other elements that are going to deploy later next year. And we will, as I've said a couple times before, keep you posted. So as they get closer, we'll do demos and education. So you'll be able to take it and run with it as soon and as fast as possible. Very exciting stuff. Very expansive. I mean, for the size of the company Alpha is, this is a very aggressive development schedule, very aggressive in there. But the intent is to continue to maintain our leadership in terms of rapid development of mobile and web, disconnected capabilities, and more making sure that all of our developers have the best tools, the best weapons to go out there to attack business problems, solve them, and make their clients just super excited and build fantastic systems. So that's a quick roadmap of post V4. Oops, I'm not going to go out of there. So we'll get out of there. I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to Dave. Dave, I do have one question, but I want to go ahead and turn it back to you for a minute. But someone had a very interesting question I'd like to cover in a moment.
All right. You might want to cover that right now because I'm looking through the list of questions and they're only difficult questions. So I just want to let you know that.
Okay. So let's go ahead and get in here. I went in, by the way, everybody who was there last week had problems with my stupid system being really slow. So we're going to go ahead and get it all set up. And I rebooted it to make sure that we have a nice clean setup. So, and actually it is running still a little slow on how that goes. So bear with me. The question came from last week is that we had a situation, or a person dialed in, they had a situation where they were using validation in their solution. And let me go ahead and open this up. I'm going to open up my demonstration, so bear with me. Dun, 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 dun. So it wakes up here. By the way, I've been testing Windows 10. It's not on this system, but works really well. Really pleased with the results of it. The situation was that the person was using validation in the user interface. So let me go ahead and show you what that means. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a UX control. And again, for people who are new to it, I'm in my Alpha development environment. This is my web projects control panel showing all the different types of things that are in my system. And what I did is I opened up this CB demo UX, and you'll see that it's a user, it's basically in this case, a form, which shows, in this case, a list of customers and a contact name, etc. But I wanted to show you right here that on these controls, you're going to notice something over on the right. You have what are called validation rules. And what validation rules are, very simple and easy to use things to provide client-side validation. There's two types of validation rules. There's the standard ones, which I'll show here, and then XBasic. Let's cover validation rules first. So let's say I had a company name, And I want to make sure when anybody fills out this form, it forces them to put something in the system. So I can click on validation rules for that field, open it up, and you'll notice at this time that it says enable rules. And so I'm going to go ahead and click enable the rules for this, and you'll notice that I have a genie in here. So I not only have something very simple, which is called require value. Boom. Now what's going to happen is when I run this, if I try to submit this form, it's going to immediately, before it's even submitted to the server, it's going to say, whoa, 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 wait, I need to have a value in my in this field. And it gives them either a standard off-the-shelf error message or a custom error message. And it allows me to do some very fancy kind of validation. For instance, I can say, you know what, I don't want any white spaces. I don't want any special characters, etc. And so you have some very sophisticated kind of abilities to make sure that the data being entered is correct at the source. And since it's client-side validation, it happens right there on the client, so it's fast, it's responsive, they fix it, it looks good, they're off to the races there. In fact, I can do validate link. I could even create my own custom expressions. So I could compare it and say, does it look like a phone number? Does it look like an email address, etc. And in fact, I can go against and specify information and look it up against a database to make sure it matches in a database or something like that. Very sophisticated. Now, back to the question. The individual in question said what they had done is they had enabled the rules, but for some reason they weren't firing, which is an interesting situation which should really not happen. So let me go ahead and do this. I'm going to create, I want to kind of show how I would go about looking and figuring out what's going on there, because I haven't seen that kind of error before, so I'm thinking that maybe something is happening in the UX. So let me go ahead and create a UX here. I'm going to create a text box here, and I'm going to call it, you know, test text box, just for exciting there. And I'm going to go ahead and in this here, I'm going to put in a submit reset button. So nothing, you know, so nothing really exciting is happening right here. But on the text box, I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to put in a validation rule that says require value. So that's all I'm doing is I'm clicking on this text box and saying for validation rules that I require a value. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm going to validation rules, saving it before I run it there. Okay. So we'll do a quick live preview of this. Starts up the server. Okay. So you'll see I have a pretty simple form. It just basically has that text field in this. So I'm going to say, hello there. Click there. Okay, nothing happened. But let me see if I get rid of this. I can go, hello there, and you'll notice that it immediately said value is required. So that's client-side validation. Again, if there's a item in there, hello, then I can click submit, and it's going to accept it. But if it's empty, it's going to fail that client-side validation and say value is required. And again, as I showed before, I can actually go into this validation rule here and say, hey, must enter a something here. Click OK, and I can go back into my, oops, I'll go into live preview, and I'll go ahead and do that here, and I'll submit that, and I can notice it puts in that custom message right there. So the question becomes, that should work. I mean, that's very reliable. It's built into it. The system will do there. But the question would be, well, you know, it doesn't seem to be working. So in my mind, what that would provoke to me is that there is some kind of value in this text box, but it may be like a space or something like that, like someone tabbed through it. So how would I check that? Because in certain situations, when I click submit, it's going ahead and accepting it. And so what I would do is I would go into server-side events. So when I click submit, it submits the whole form back to the server. And then the server runs this after dialog validate. And notice that it's after dialog validate, meaning that this will run only after it passes all of those validation rules that I put in my system. And actually, another great question that came in this week, in which Dave and I are queuing up for, is we're going to walk you through sort of the life cycle of a UX form and talk about what happens in each of these different states and explain how you would use these in a little bit more detail. But for today, when it passes the after dialog validate, it runs this piece of script here if there's anything in it. If not, then it goes ahead and, well, that's all it does. It runs it from here. Also, by the way, there is the validate, and you can put actually some validation code in here at the same time. So if you wanted to create your own custom validation, you could do that here. So let's look at this. I'm going to go ahead and go in here, and I'm going to say value is equal to e.data submitted dot, and then text box. I think I called it text box. Let me look at the control here. Yeah, it's called text box. So I'm going to go to server and say text box, okay? And then I'm going to go here, and I'm just going to do that. And I'll say, let's go ahead and, so we'll go ahead and we'll do this. So I go debug. Okay, so what I've done is I'm basically trapping with the e.data, what's in that text box. So when this runs in e.data submitted, all of the values of all the different controls. So if I had 10 other controls on there, I could access any one of those there, and I'll go value. Okay, so and by the way, I would normally, I would go dim value as C, dim another value as C, but I was being sloppy there. So those are variables. So what it's going to do is take the value of that and put it in here. So the way I would test this, and this is what I suggest for this individual, is go ahead and set up your validation rules here as you need that. And then when you run it, go ahead and do the following is, let me go before I do that, go into your, after dialog validate, go ahead and put in a debug 1, which will start the debugger, which I'll show you in a moment. And then what I would do is look at the value of that text box. And you can really make sure that it's empty, that for some reason, for whatever reason, it wasn't entered in there. So we can get there and go like do live preview. And then what I can do is, you'll notice is I can put in test. It's going to pass validation, so it's going to run that code. And you'll notice that it brought up my debugger. So when it saw this debug, it opens up my debugger. And that's a topic for a whole other day, but I want to show you how you can do that. So now I can step through each line of this. So for instance here, and I can actually look at the value of that e.dot submitted and say, is it truly empty or not? So that would be the first thing I'd check, is that if it requires a value, it's possible that someone put a space in there or something like that, or somehow it's getting not a real value. So you can actually inspect it after it's been submitted to look at what the value is. Now this is doing it on a UX control, and then you can then see if truly what's going on there. Now we have also a situation where I'm going to quickly create a new grid component, and I'm going to go ahead and, for people who are not familiar, this is the grid component. I'm going to connect it to my database, and I'm going to go into customers here, go into my fields, and I'm going to do somewhat similar. I'm going to put these out on my there, and I'll call it editable, so they're all editable. So now when I run my grid, you're going to see that all these items are editable from that standpoint. Very similar to what I did with the UX control, but this is a grid. So the next thing I'll do is I'll go to this, say, company name here, and you'll notice in here you have the same situation. You have validation rules. So I can go in here and I can say enable rules requires value. And then I can go in here and make sure that's done there. Now, very similar to what I showed you before is that the grid component has a set of events that occur where we can kind of see what's going on under the covers. So I would go to the server-side events, and then I would go to the can update record. Okay, so these, as you can see, there's tons of different events that you can trap and do things while you do it. So for instance, this can update record, and if you click on this info on this event fires before an update is made to an existing record. So therefore, this is a good way for the individual to test, to say, hey, what is the true value of that? Why did it not trap that validation rule? Because the can update record only allows this to happen after it's done the validation. So very similar to what I had before is I can sit there and I can go dim value as C, and I can go value is equal to, and you'll notice I have a shortcut up here where I can say into this the company name. So it's a little different. It's kind of, the other one's e.data submitted, but in this case, this one's called data submitted. So you have to kind of get used to that. But what I can do then is I can put in a debug in here, and much like I showed you before, when this fires, it will trigger this debug, and then I can inspect what is actually being submitted into the grid and really make sure that it's that it's not like an empty field, meaning that it's empty field. The other thing that I like to look at things also, and this is another tip, and this is useful for a lot of different people, so bear with me, is in SQL, obviously, a column can have not only it can not only have a value, but it can have what's called a null value, which means there's no value present. And actually, when you're working with Alpha, there's a function here that in company name, if I leave company name blank, normally what it would do is it would just put an empty string in that column, which is fine. I mean, maybe I just want an empty string in there. But sometimes I want to be able to actually say that is a null value, meaning nothing was entered. And so you'll notice that there's a little setting on this that says blank is null. And if I go back to my item here and look at my controls here to the text box, scroll down to the bottom, I have the same situation where I can say if it's blank, it is null. And that's very unique and very different because null is a true value that's being submitted to the database, saying I'm setting the value of that column to null, meaning that nobody set a value. So it's kind of a little esoteric, but it's true on that how it goes. So you may want to also check if you've got that setting that blank is null, it could be saying, well, the person didn't enter anything, that field is required, but blank is null, so I'm going to accept that null value. And then you can set up other ways to trap to make sure they've actually typed something in, etc. So check on that also. But that's one I see a lot of times people get tripped over, is that they'll create a form or a grid, and they'll go in and they'll set the default value in their MySQL table or SQL table to be blank or to be null, and then when they save it, it will be actually an empty string, and they really want to have a null value in that field. Well, just look down here for blank is null and select that, and then when the grid or the form saves it to the database, it's actually going to force and tell the database insert a null value in that column because the person didn't put anything in there. And so that would be another thing I would check on and see if you're handling null values. In the client-side interpretation could be saying, well, you know, it's null, so I'm going to set it as, or you set it as blank, so I'm assuming you want me to set this as null, and that might have a situation involved with that. So that's kind of a quick and dirty introduction to what I like to call client-side validation or validation rules. Basically, all you have to do is on any of yours, you click this, you enable the rules, you say whatever you want it to be. You can actually test it down here to do it. You can create very sophisticated rules to be done. Thus, you're not writing a whole bunch of code to do your validation. It's actually being done by the system from that standpoint. And then the only other thing I wanted to show you is that when you actually submit it, the after dialog validate will happen. You could actually put a debug in there and then inspect that out, the value that's being sent back, and that might be able to give you some pointers and actually allow you to see what's going on behind the scenes and see why, for whatever reason, that validation rule doesn't seem to be firing. So I hope that's helpful. I hope that's helpful to everybody else. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to Dave McCormick.
Great. We have one quick question that I can answer here. Someone asked if there's anything new coming in the way of documentation in the next quarter. They said they like the videos, but they'd like a structured sort of programming environment where they can learn, pick up the stuff themselves. The answer to that is yes. We are working on a text-based documentation system to replace the one that's built into Alpha Anywhere. It'll be used. You'll still be able to access it from Alpha Anywhere as well as on the web. And it will be completely restructured. We're making a lot of changes to it. We did demonstrate it last week. It'll use Elasticsearch to quickly find topics, and it'll have feedback mechanisms so that if something doesn't answer your question, it'll actually alert us, and we could go to take a look to see if the documentation was correct. We can quickly make changes to it. It's also all HTML-based, which means that we can make changes to it very quickly and not have to worry about our old wiki system that we had used before. So that'll be coming probably around January 1st. We've made quite a lot of progress in it already.
I
So
kind of like that wiki system. I feel like I'm going back in time to the 90s, you know, it just feels
I know,
good.
it's painful. It is.
Yeah.
Here's a good question. This has to do with pagination in groups in a list control. And the question is whether or not we can paginate based on a group instead of on individual records. I don't know if you know the answer to that one.
You know, I honestly don't. That's a really good question. My understanding is you paginate only on records versus groups.
Yeah.
I'm assuming what they want to do is have each group on a different page. So
Right. Yep.
that scenario. But you should be able to set the pagination logic to match the group kind of logic. But you know, pagination tends to do it more on quantity of number of records versus that. So I'd have to look into that a little bit more detail. I just don't know off the top of my head how you would set pagination to be linked to groups.
Excellent.
Sorry, well, not so excellent, but
well, we'll find out the answer. I think is
yes,
the portion of it. It's not excellent.
We'll take that under advisement.
We will look at that and we'll get back to you.
Yes, great question. Thank you.
So here's a question about using the login and someone designed a login and a sign up, and with links it's not integrated. I was wondering though, can we use the integrated sign up system with PhoneGap or not?
Not that I'm aware of. What I've found is that people tend to create go to a web page and sign it up. The issue is if you're trying to do sign up in a disconnected fashion, that's a little dicey because you really aren't when you're disconnected. How do you touch the security system on the Alpha server to be able to validate a person, put them into the system and stuff like that? So first, for that kind of operation, you really kind of need to be online to sign up for a new account. Then within that, you could put your registration pages as just A5W pages inside your PhoneGap app and show those pages that go right to the server, allow them to set up the login, and then take them back to the login screen, and then you're off to the races from a disconnected PhoneGap application at that point in time. But as far as actually doing the registration process locally on the mobile device, I'm not really sure if there's any methodology because you really need to be connected at this, in my understanding, to the server during that registration process so it can update the security tables on the server that are tracking your information and your permissions and other things there. Also, I'm noticing, and this is a very important kind of thing that I'm seeing more and more, is that you need an authentication process where when someone registers to access, say, a system, you send them an email saying, hey, is this really you? Click on this link, and then it goes in and enables that person to be able to log in. And that's kind of a common pattern I'm seeing it. And so if you were to try and register on the mobile device disconnected, that really wouldn't work because you still need to get some kind of confirmation email or text. So I would anticipate if you're going to do that, I would set it up within your PhoneGap app of just bringing up A5W pages within the app that go right to your server, do the registration there, and then you can go back to the login screen, and then everything else would operate the same as it does before.
Great. Looking back at the roadmap that you started with, here's a question about IIS and the Alpha Cloud. And the question is, what is the relationship of IIS's ability to scale and the Alpha Cloud on AWS? Or is there a relationship?
Very good point. They both are, let's see, let me go here. There we are. Actually, very good question. There's an element of they share the primary goal, which is to provide a more robust and powerful and efficient way to serve up internet applications, whether mobile or desktop web. So the one thing they share between themselves is the fact that IIS and AWS have very powerful sort of ways to serve up web pages and other pieces there. So what we're finding out is that the scalability and the response time for both of those systems are greater than a Alpha server operating on its own on a hosted server. So one of the key requirements first was that by using IIS to serve up the web pages, you're going to see a much faster environment. And then in terms of the Alpha Cloud, there's also tuning and other things so that the web pages and the content going back to the mobile device or the desktop web are going to be served up much higher. The other key aspect is scalability. With Alpha, if you were set up a standalone Alpha server on a specific Windows server, you could actually spin up on a single server a different application server for each core on that. But you have to go through that process, and then you have to set up the redirection and the other pieces like that. What buys you in both AWS and IIS is that they're going to help do the load balancing, the redirection. So basically, let's look at IIS first, you set up the Alpha Web Server, or App Server, excuse me, as a plugin into IIS, and therefore IIS is then automatically loading up more cores and expanding the functionality of Alpha versus you having to do that manually. So it manages all that process for you. So therefore, you get much faster response times, especially as you scale the requirements of that server. In terms of AWS and the Alpha Cloud, it's going to be very similar, is that as the demands increase on the server running on AWS, the Alpha Cloud will automatically spin up more resources to take those incoming requests and keep your request feedback very low, or the cycle time very low. And both of those systems will do that for you versus you having to set up a whole environment to do it. And therefore, you gain a lot of benefits. The system is managing itself. It's much more reliable. It's much higher speed, more response times are lower, and you're going to get much happier customers. So they're different animals, because Alpha AWS, the Alpha Cloud, is not really going to use IIS. It's going to be built using their infrastructure, and they have a lot of really cool features built into it we can tap into. But again, that's going to be all hidden in terms of you're just going to go to a forum, and it's going to take care, you'll set the parameters of how it should add resources, and it does it for you. Same thing with IIS, is once you're set up on IIS can take care of spinning up more resources and handling more things to help you out and increase your response, or decrease your response time and improve it. The only other thing I would say about IIS is that we go into a number of what I call Microsoft shops, where they use IIS for all their existing web assets, and therefore you can move into that environment very cleanly, because otherwise the Alpha App Server is just kind of a standalone, and often people are like, oh, how do we manage it? How do we control it? How do we make sure that we're providing security for it? Whereas once it's plugged into the IIS framework, the IT staff at those companies have already a whole set of tools to manage plugins in IIS, to set policy, to monitor, to log, etc. So you'll see within existing IIS IT shops, you're going to find people are really liking that kind of deployment model. So I hope that gives you a little bit more flavor. There are two ends to address the same thing, which is provide a simple, scalable, highly reliable hosting environment for your applications so that you don't have to worry about that and put in a whole bunch of effort and engineering to do that. You can mainly spin it up and get all the benefits without having to do all this setup and doing weird setups and multiple servers and all this stuff. We'll handle the complexity for you. And that's really one of the true reasons for both of those implementations.
Great. And if I could just add two things to that. The first is that while Dean is correct, you don't have to worry about configuring an IIS server or whatever. The IIS technology is being used as part of the cloud. In fact, it was a prerequisite for us to build it.
Oh,
so
I'm
technology
sorry.
is there, but you don't have to manage it. So it's not as if you're logging in and spinning up your own instance of IIS. We're just handling that behind the scenes. So it looks and feels like a completely different animal underneath the cover. So there's a bit of IIS in there.
Well, I think that was top secret, so everybody will have to be on this call, because they all know that secret.
You know that now, and I got the engineers.
Loose lips eating chips.
All right. The other thing is someone asked about, and this is a great one about, and we will get into this in a future session about cloud, but like when you spin up the capacity, how is that going to impact the licensing? I mean, if you bought on a traditional model, you buy one a license to run on one particular server, and when you run out of power, you then go and buy another license and set it up on another server. And the answer to that is that with cloud, the pricing works so that the hardware and the software costs are already coupled together. So it's already built into the price. You'll know that, when I scale to 1,000 users, you don't have to think about the licensing. It's already included with what Alpha Cloud is going to offer for you on that.
Yeah, and one of the cool things, and I think people are really going to like this, certain types of applications are, they're not constant demand. Like we actually have a client, very interesting client, that services schools, and they help build and manage and deliver the directories for schools. And so the month of August is a nightmare. Basically, you have every school, like the August and September when school starts, getting set up and people get in there, their server demands are enormous. So they have to spin up a bunch of servers that are available so that people get acceptable performance. But during the rest of the year, it's really kind of a little small trickle of information, reports and stuff, so they don't need that. Well, the cool thing about the Alpha Cloud is that now you don't have to go through all that setup and everything else. The system can be configured so that as that demand increases, and again, you can control this, that it will spin all that up to support that, so that instantaneously, boom, you're good to go. You can handle those peak times, but then it will spin back down so you're not consuming a lot of resources and expenses when you really don't need it. And that's a really cool model because it really allows you to optimize your expenses to service your group and really have control over that, which is a little tougher now just because you kind of got to provision everything, get it set up and everything else. Now we're going to make that much simpler for you.
Great. So now I've got two performance questions here. The first has to do with SQL, and this person is running into an issue when they're using Alpha Anywhere. It seems to be really slow when it's doing large queries. What can you do about something like that?
Very good question. What I would anticipate is that first and foremost, I would use the query analyzer within the MySQL to analyze it. And there's a lot of really good third-party tools that will actually literally show you those queries, how long they're running, and specifically what is the cost of doing those queries. It basically literally shows you that within a query, what's costing you the most, which kind of joins. Often there's complex joins going on in these kind of queries, so it tells you which. And so first and foremost, I always start by looking at my query and saying, is there a way to optimize my query, i.e. by adding specific indexes into my tables so that the queries run much faster. So always I put my first effort into figuring out, okay, what is that query? And you can run these queries. What's nice is you can usually run these queries right within the workbenches and analyze them there without even using Alpha. Then once I've got that to the fully optimized level, then I go back and I look at Alpha and I look at how I'm consuming and using that information from the query. So for instance, do I need all the columns that are being brought back by that query? Often it's easy to say select star, which is select all columns from a table. Well, maybe you don't need all columns. Maybe you only need a few columns. So in that situation, you can actually tune up your query to reduce the amount of data that's going back from the SQL to the Alpha. Because the reality is you make a request to Alpha, Alpha turns around, and let's say it's a grid, it turns around, it runs, it sends the query to SQL, SQL runs that query and then gives you back a batch of data. Alpha takes that data, then munges it into the format that is needed by the user interface, be it a grid, a form, a list control, and then it sends that information back to the front end to be rendered on the mobile platform or mobile device or desktop web. So the first thing I do is say, okay, is my query running as efficiently as possible, yes or no? Secondly, what data is actually coming back from that query, and can I reduce the amount of data that is really needed for this particular situation? And therefore, then I can reduce the amount of data traffic going from SQL to Alpha, and then the amount of time Alpha takes to kind of munge it, that's a technical term, into a format that is then presentable by the user on the front end. And then the last but not least is I look at, especially when I'm using grids and lists, there are a lot of features within those tools that allow you to do what's called, in the list virtualization, and in the grid you can actually reduce the amount of rows that are coming back. And thus it's only showing you a subset of what came back from that query, thus reducing the amount of time it gets presented to the user. And definitely there's this technique called list virtualization, and if you look up on the Alpha 5 V12 pre-release notes, there's a demonstration on this. because it's smart enough to say, you know what, you're only going to be looking at 20 records or so once this thing happens. So I'm going to put together the full representation of those 20 and keep the rest. So step one, make sure your query is fully optimized. You know, sometimes I'll actually use a stored procedure because it can pre-compile that and have that ready to go. And then step two is I look at what kind of information is in that query. Do I need all those columns? Do I need all that data? And if I don't, I get rid of it or slim it down, because that will reduce the amount of data traffic and reduce the amount of time it takes to then munge it into a format for the user. And last but not least is I look at my grids and my lists and say, do I really need, you know, can I use the virtualization, or can I tune my grid to have fewer number of rows come back so that I increase that response or that perceived response time to the user to make it acceptable from what they want to do. And that's kind of my three-step program I use to kind of go through and optimize my user interfaces and improve them, improve response time and perceived response time.
Excellent. So we have another question about an upcoming, about a topic that someone would like to see in the future, but we may as well now take time to do a little house cleaning, explain what our schedule might be for the next couple of weeks or so. Let's first start with a question, though, which is that a person here has tried to use Git, but they found it to be complicated, and they were wondering if we could do a demo on how to save alpha components into GitHub so that you could retrieve them back later. And I think that,
yes,
that would be a very good example for us to go over. We do that here already, and we can show you how. But over the next couple of weeks, next Wednesday is the Thanksgiving weekend, Thanksgiving Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving. And Dion and I will both be gone, and we'll be gone the following weeks. We're not going to have webinars for 2 weeks. During that time, though, we're going to be putting together a list of these and other topics, and we're going to actually send out that list to everyone who signed up for our webinar mailing list. And we will let you know what's coming and on what days, and it'll just make it easier for you guys to plan and to send in questions ahead of time if we can keep them to a topic. So I just wanted to bring that up. I think
and one other thing, you know,
sure,
if I can add, two other things actually. One is next year, as we have all these new capabilities, we're going to be doing some deeper dive webinars, you know, where we bring on the experts and we really go into, say, you know, tablet optimized forms, maybe some IIS work, all these cool little features that they're not little, they're actually expansive, so that you can drive deeper knowledge. So we'll be scheduling those up so that we can really bring you up to speed. And secondly, we really debated having reruns of Facts of Life for the next 2 weeks, but we just have not been able to address the licensing issue.
Boy,
so we're
tough.
sorry.
Yeah.
We really tried hard,
but
we're not able to pull that off.
All right. We have 3 minutes. Maybe you can tackle this last question.
Okay, I'll give it a try.
You have a customer who wants to use a layout table report. And what they want to do is they want to create a receipt. So far, so good. But they want to have 3 copies of the receipt. Basically, identical copies, except at the top, one will say customer, one will say accounting, and the other will say customer folder on it. Can that be done?
Yes. Well, you can do it a couple different ways. One is you can make that item and let me go into my reports here and let me see if I have here. And I'll kind of explain how I would attack that, and then you go after it. Is that inside here, and let's make sure this works. Let's say I have a field up here. Well, what I can do is by the way, for people who are new, I'm in my report editor, and in this case, this is a free-form report. It could be also a table layout report. It kind of works the same. Actually, let me see. Let me find a table layout report. Do I have one here? Let's see. Oh, that's a quick report. Let's see. Let's see if a table layout. Oh, okay. Here we go. Let's see if we have this here. Okay. So we have a table layout report. So it's more of a tabular report. And up here you want to have a, let's go ahead and add a new column. So I added a new column here, and I now have this cell. And what the person, if I understand correctly, is they want to have in this cell, say, like instead of, you know, there's maybe customer, so you could put in this. So I could do it this way and create 3 separate reports that are identical except for this, and then just print the report that I want, or generate it and send it as a PDF or however you want. That's a bit cumbersome. So what I'd rather do is I'm going to go into my report and I'm going to go to calculated fields. And in calculated fields, and there's some tips here that you can see, is that I can pass to this report an argument. So when I create this report, I can create arguments that go into it. Let me go ahead and show you that real quick, so bear with me. And I've got 1 more minute to do this. So when I'm going to go to this order details layout report here. I'm going to right-click on it, and I'm going to go to Data Source, Show Data Source Definition. Okay? And then I'm going to edit that data source, and it's going to walk me through my Genie. And this is where I'm normally selecting what database I'm going to, what table. But you'll notice in here I have, say, define argument. So I can define an argument, and I can call that report. Let's call it a report header. Okay? Okay. So I've created that argument, and I'm going to go ahead and leave that blank. Now, normally what I would do is I would use that maybe in a where clause to limit it, but for this case I'm just passing in that report header. So when I call this report, it's going to say, well, I have an argument here, what do you want that argument to be? And in this case you can say report header is customer, file, or accounting, or whatever. See there. Now what I can do is when I'm in my order details layout report, I can go to report, calculated fields, and again, looking at the tips, what I can do is actually get that argument value. So A5 underscore get argument value. So I can say header info is equal to A5W get argument value. Let me see if that's correct. It's yep, get argument value, and then in there I can go report header. And that's the name of that argument I just created. So now what happens is when this report runs, it's going to grab that argument I passed in it and put it in header info. And now that I've got that set up, I can click OK. Oh, it doesn't like that. A5, did I do this? Oh, it's A5 underscore. I'm so used to using the web ones. A5. Let's click OK. Okay, now what I can do is instead of hard coding that, I can go to field and let's see, I have calculated header info. So now what's going to happen is when this report runs, it's going to look at the value that was passed to it as an argument, and then it's going to put that into my calculated field, and then in here I put where I want that. So when I pass it to there, and actually, so that's how it works there. And so now all you do is when you call that report, instead of having 3 reports, you hand it saying, I am calling this report, but I want it to be printed with customer at top. You pass customer as a header, and it's just going to drop that piece of text right in here as that calculated field. It grabs the argument, puts it in the calculated field, puts it in there, and you're off to the races there. So hopefully that will solve your ability to use one report but have it kind of look differently. And that applies for everything you want to do within the report system.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you, everyone, for attending. We are out of time. We are going to see you back here in, it looks like, 1 to 3 weeks. So we're going to miss the next 2 weeks, but we appreciate having you guys here. In the meantime, please send your questions to guides, G-U-I-D-E-S, at alphasoftware.com. For all those of you who celebrate Thanksgiving here in the United States, have a happy Thanksgiving next week. Take care and goodbye.